Hi, my name is Todd Stanley, and I sometimes go by the Gifted Guy. What I'm going to be talking to you about today is why you should not use online programs such as Rubistar and others to create your rubrics. If you want your rubrics to be objective and you want them to be valid, you have to put in a little more work than just plugging in, because that's what Rubistar does. You go to Rubistar, you plug in what you're looking for, and it generates a rubric for you. A couple things. Rubistar doesn't know your students. Rubistar doesn't know your expectations necessarily. It doesn't know what your students are capable of. There's a lot of things that a program such as that does not know, which is why I highly recommend creating your own rubric where you can put those factors into play. I am the author of the book, Using Rubrics for Performance-Based Assessment, a practical guide to evaluating student work. So let me give you some reasons why you should not use rubrics using programs such as Rubistar. So here is a Rubistar rubric. What I did was I went to the Rubistar website and I plugged in the things I would be looking for in an oral presentation. So things such as posture and eye contact, preparedness, and so forth. You can see those in the category. And then for each of the categories, they created a column with a number, 4, 3, 2, and 1. 4 being the most points, 1 being the least points. And then what eventually happens is it kind of works itself down. So 4 is that they did everything really wonderfully. 1 is that they did everything very poorly. And so they kind of step you down into from 4, 3, 2, and 1. So you can tell what the differences between those particular numbers are. And then what you do is you circle whatever box you think it applies, and then that point gets added to the student's grade and establishes the student's grade. So you can see here, pretty straightforward. You sit down with this rubric and you have all these categories, you have these numbers, and you as the teacher are then evaluating where does a student fall under this, the number system, and under what category. Here are some of the problems with this particular rubric. The first one is that many of the adverbs that are used are very vague. So let me explain what I mean by this. If you look at preparedness specifically under the category, and you walk with me here through 4, 3, 2, and 1, it says student is completely prepared, student seems pretty prepared, student is somewhat prepared, and student does not seem at all prepared. So the question becomes, what do these adverbs, how do we measure these adverbs? What does pretty prepared mean? I hear pretty prepared and I'm thinking, oh, they must have dressed up really nice, or they, really look pretty. But what does pretty prepared mean? It's very vague. And as a result, it's very subjective. So what I think might be pretty prepared might be different than what you think is pretty prepared. Similarly with the 2, the student is somewhat prepared. What does somewhat prepared mean? So I think some of my students are somewhat prepared if they're able to bring a pencil to class. Other teachers may say if they don't have everything they're supposed to have that is required, then they're not prepared. So these adverbs are very vague. The same thing under content, where you have shows a full understanding or a good understanding of parts. Good is the worst adverb you can use because it really doesn't have a clear definition or measurement of what good is. We say to kids all the time, good job. And a kid may have done an okay job, a kid might have done an excellent job. And good job is just a blanket statement, and it's very vague, and it's not specific enough. So you need to be careful with the adverbs that you use in your rubrics so that you can make sure that people understand what it is that they're looking for. Because I don't know the difference between a full understanding and a good understanding. There's no distinction there. And so I can't objectively sit there and evaluate a student with a 4 or a 3 because I don't know what either of those means. Those two could mean the same thing. So how do I distinguish that? The second part is that then they go to the other extreme and they're too specific with some of their language. In other words, the adverbs are very vague. Then they kind of go the other route when you look at speaking clearly. It says speaks clearly and distinctly all 100 to 95% of the time. 3 is that they speak clearly and distinctly the same, but they mispronounce one word. So this kid has one chance to make a mistake, which is not a very great place to put people, especially if they're doing public speaking. Public speaking is not a perfect assessment. It's not a perfect way to people. Even Martin Luther King Jr. in his "I Have a Dream" speech stumbles at times, or doesn't mispronounce a word, but he might use a word and not as effectively as he wanted to. So am I going to give him a 3 with one of the greatest speeches of all time because he mispronounces one word? And if he mispronounces 2 words, I got to knock him down to the 2. So it's so specific. Similarly, when you look at number 2, when it says speaks clearly and distinctly most, 94 to 85% of the time, I don't know what those percentages look like. I'm not a math person, and even if I was, I would have to really pay attention to determine whether it was 85% or 76% or what do those percentages mean. A lot of times in rubrics, we want to equate it to a number or a percentage. And you need to find the middle ground, the Goldilocks, the not too hot, not too cold, but just right. In other words, if you're too hot, you have too many specific things, it's really difficult to determine how to measure that. If you are too vague, you don't know where it falls either because you have no guidance on what that looks like. So we have to find that middle part where our adverbs are more clear and we're not so specific. I mean, there has to be some wiggle room, some leeway for the teacher to make a decision. And this one does not give them any decision-making power at all. If the kid mispronounces one word, they get knocked down. And that's the way the rubric is written. The next thing is it would force the teacher to pay attention to things that would distract from other things that have more value. So you have to ask yourself, what are you really looking for in a presentation? What are the most important aspects of that? So if I'm looking at posture and eye contact, it is certainly important, but is it important enough to warrant its own category? And maybe it is, but often cases, if a student gets up and they're really prepared and they speak clearly and their content is amazing, if they slouch a tiny bit, I'm not giving them a B, or I'm not knocking them down for that. Or if they, and it says this here, establishes eye contact with everyone in the room. What is that kid is darting around. There's 30 people in the room. He's darting around to 30 different people in the room to try to make eye contact. So this can be written a little bit better, and it can be incorporated into other parts. So instead of posture and eye contact and speaking clearly, maybe you have like the presentation aspect, and those are categories under. You notice also in this Rubistar, you only have one descriptor per category. So you don't get really a fully fleshed idea of what the category is other than this one thing. So I would rather take the posture and eye contact and speaking clearly and combine them into one. And then I'm not looking at 2 different things. I'm looking at one thing with 2 different aspects to it. And so I can pay attention to things that are really important. I think it's really important that a student, when they speaks with confidence. And there's nothing in here that allows me to look for that. I also think the content is really important. And that goes into our final, which is this would allow other aspects to inflate the grades than actually show mastery. Assessments are supposed to determine mastery. How well does the student know the skills or whatever it is you're trying to teach? How well do they understand that? Where are they? If you look at in this case, you're looking at the part where it says, speaks clearly, preparedness, posture, and eye contact. If you add all those up, so if a kid comes in, has great posture and eye contact, they have everything they're supposed to have, and they speak clearly, this student would get 16 or 12 points under the 4 category. And if their content is horrible, if they're completely wrong, if they're, showing you information that is not correct or is really biased, they get a 1. But they're still getting a 13 out of 16, which is a pretty high grade. So in this case, you would want to weigh your grades differently. So instead of a 4, 3, 2, and a 1 for each category, if content is really important to you, you may times that by 2 or 3 when you're trying to figure out. Although I do think it's a mistake that a lot of people make, that they try to equate rubrics with numbers and percentages. It doesn't have to be that way. You can definitely use an informal observation to determine if the descriptors are very clear. What is the student, when they're doing a really excellent job in posture and eye contact, what does that look like? So my fear on a rubric like this is that, and I've seen this many times with teacher rubrics, is that the kid can get a good grade even though they didn't really demonstrate the mastery of what you wanted them to. Because in this case, content is going to cover my content standard. The posture, preparedness, and speaking clearly are other skills that don't necessarily fall under the content standard. And yet, I think they're important skills for students to learn. But maybe I don't value them as much. So if I'm trying to make sure that a parent knows and a student knows whether they mastered the content or not, this is not going to allow me to do that because of the way the rubric is set up. The final thing I'll point out just in general is the biggest difference between a Rubistar rubric and a rubric of your own making that is specific and that your rubric would show someone what it looks like. The Rubistar actually tells what it looks like. So if you look at that Rubistar, it tells you, but it doesn't show you. Let me give you an example. Okay. So shows a full understanding. That's telling you that a student has a full understanding, but I don't know what that looks like. So how could I show that? Well, it shows they have a full understanding because they can talk about it with confidence. And when they're asked questions, they seem to be able to respond to those. That would show me a full understanding. And so I could be more specific with what that looks like. Similar with a good understanding. So how to distinguish between full understanding and a good understanding? Well, maybe a good understanding is that the student seems to know what they're talking about for a majority of it. There may be a part or two where they misrepresent something, or they don't quite explain it very clearly and in enough detail. If I ask a question, they might not be able to answer, or they might be confused by the question. So that would be a good understanding. So I could show what that looks like if I create my own rubric. But on a Rubistar, the way that these categories are set up, it's just a simple telling description. It tells you what it looks like. You need to show what it looks like. If you want it to be objective, if you want students to know, because here's the ultimate determination of whether a rubric is successful or not. It's not that if you, the teacher, can use it to determine a student's grade. It's if the student can use it once they get it back. Can they use it to determine how they can become better? Or what do they need to avoid doing the next time? So this is a form of feedback. And you need to make sure that your feedback is very clear. So if you circle that a student, sometimes stands up straight and establishes eye contact, the student knows, okay, I wasn't standing the entire time, and I may have made occasional eye contact, but I wasn't, I looked down at my, what I was reading or whatever, and I wasn't making eye contact all of the time. So they can, okay, this is what I can do next time to improve, because that's what feedback is all about. It's not telling students necessarily how great everything was, but what they did that made it great. So that can repeat that the next time. They can say, okay, I did that and it resulted in a good measurement, a good grade. So I can continue to do that. I did this. It kind of affected my grade. So if I want to improve, then this is where I go. That feedback needs to be very clear. If I circled these particular categories and gave this back to a student, what is a student? They're like, well, I spoke clearly 94 to 85% of the time. So what does that look like exactly? So we have to make sure we're showing them, and that the feedback is so clear that students understand why they got what they got. And more importantly, what they can do to move forward from that. Can they do to repeat the things that they did that were really good and improve the things that were not so great. Just to give you an idea what an objective rubric might look like, that is not as vague and is more valid because it measures what you're looking for. Here's an example of what I could do with the speaking rubric, the oral presentation rubric. So I'm looking at 3 categories rather than 4. because I've combined some like I talked about. And instead of having numbers, I'm just using an excellent, good, and needs improvement. I know I said good is not necessarily a good adverb to use, but in this case, it is distinguishing between excellent and good, between those two, and I have clear descriptors in there. So let me walk you through one of these. So under content, remember content from before was this right here: full understanding, good understanding, so on and so forth. Here's how I did mine. So I broke it down into what involves content. So it could be the visuals, not just visuals having them, but visuals that help the audience understand the speech in a deeper manner. So I'm showing what that looks like. I have a clear structure of a beginning, middle, and end with each of these developed. So you can say, well, they didn't have a middle, or there was no ending, no conclusion to that, or whatever. You can determine that. You can measure that. The content is relevant to the topic and strengthens its point. So it doesn't say if you make one mistake, you're down to good. Good says content is relevant to the topic, but does not always strengthen its point. So the content should always be relevant, but maybe it's not strengthening. Maybe it's just, not as important, as it does not need to be shared necessarily. So I clearly distinguish between what it means to be excellent and good with these 4 different descriptors under content. I also look at the speaking. So I combine some things: sitting up straight, having a good pace, focusing on your audience, so that you're making eye contact, and that the time limit. So you might have a time limit. And this one I'm very specific because there is a time limit for this particular oral presentation. And this allows me to determine whether students were in that window or not. So in this case, it means that specific is important to what I'm trying to teach students, which is that to give a 5-minute speech. And so I'm giving them a window. So I'm giving them some leeway on either side on what that might look like. But you can see it is made of multiple descriptors. So it's not just sitting up straight that's going to do it. You have to sit up straight. So I may circle sitting up straight as excellent, but the pace may only be good. And then not focusing on your audience might be a need improvement. And so I'm determining, okay, you spoke good, but one part was excellent and one part was needed improvement and one part was in the middle. And so students can then say, okay, I really need to work on focusing on my audience next time because I didn't do well on that one. Or I need to make sure I sit up straight because it gave me an excellent on that one. And so what I would do, one thing I would also add is that when I use a rubric such as this, I circle the different categories. I also usually put a written comment in there so that students know, all right, this is what I was seeing. This is what I saw that allowed me to measure it this way. So students are very, very clear. Again, it's part of that feedback of making sure that you're clear to students what it is why they got the grade they want. You never want a student to say, well, I got a grade, but I'm not sure why I got that particular grade. You want it to be very clear. Now, you see, I use very vague terms such as excellent, good, and needs improvement. You could change these to letter grades. You could change them to percentages if you feel it's necessary, although I feel that sometimes can pigeonhole you into having to, make sure it falls within that. This objective rubric such as this has a little bit of subjectivity and allows the teacher to use their professional judgment, but is not clouding. So I feel if I gave anyone this rubric, they could sit down, and if I and them were evaluating a student together, we would pretty much be on the same page because we're indicating under specific descriptors what they did and did not do, or what they did well and what they could have done better.